that they said everybody loved and respected Harry. He'd give you the shirt off his back. He's a respected local businessman, but he's not saved. We've got to get him saved. Everybody was like kind of ganging up and praying for Harry. And I was thinking, boy, wouldn't I like to talk to Harry? But I think I shook his hand, and I just really couldn't look him in the eye. I was so embarrassed. Here this whole community was treating this guy like he was a social leper or something, like he was this thing that had a problem. And I was sat over by the Christmas tree, and he was way across the room in an armchair. And the minister got up and said something about, isn't it wonderful that we could all come together to celebrate the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ on this time of year? And from across the room, Harry said, not all of us. And boy, did I respect those few words. I thought, wow, here's a guy who's courageous enough to be different. He doesn't care what people think. Those few little words that he said were much more meaningful than all these sermons and hymns that I'd heard by these people playing this phony drama, you know, because of their insecure need to be loved and wanting to go to heaven or whatever it is. Here's a good man. They all admitted was good and moral. A good man who would sacrifice, but he wasn't saved. So I never preached again. I went home, I wrote a letter out to everyone I could think of. I sent it out. The day I dropped those 50-some envelopes, the first batch, into the mailbox, that was almost a religious experience. It's like, in just a few seconds I was holding on to it going, this is kind of important. I'm sending out to all these people, co-ministers, co-missionaries, Christian publishers, relatives, everyone I could think of. I'm not a believer anymore. I'm now an atheist/agnostic. And when I let go of them, I thought, good. Like, it was like a real thing. It was actually doing something real. For once in my life, doing something real. So if you can imagine the responses, I got them. There's still some good Christian friends, and we're still friends today. I got some surprisingly ugly, horrible responses from people that I guess we weren't really friends, were we? If they would have responded like that. So that's really an overly brief story of my transition from preacher to atheist. And I don't know what you want to do with the rest of the time, or if there is any time left.
Well, we have a schedule over there.
Oh, a schedule? Oh. I should have followed it.
And I think that people might want to know, starting where you left off, how you got to know Annie, and how much longer that was after your break, or when it fit in there.
How did I get to know Annie Laurie? Her name is Annie Laurie. It's a good name, so don't call her Annie. You know that old song, Annie Laurie? Didn't you know that song? Okay. Annie Laurie is my wife. She's a founder of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. My Christian marriage fell apart. My Christian wife did not want to be unequally yoked together with a non-believer. And we both mutually agreed that because of my change primarily, the marriage was not going to work anymore. She later remarried a Baptist minister, and they're happy. And that's how she sees herself, as the minister's wife, basically. And so I'm not going to go tell them that he was plan B for her life, you know? I mean, I'm gonna, because they believe that all things work together for good, right? So in her life now, they seem pretty happy. They're in the ministry of some sort. I read a book called Woe to the Women, the Bible Tells Me So, back in the mid-'80s. And the author of it was a young woman named Annie Laurie Gaylor. So I sent a little letter. Thank you. This is wonderful. How the modern law is based a lot on some of these patriarchal attitudes out of the Bible. And she went through the Bible and showed how even today there's still, the fights that Elizabeth Cady Stanton had to wage had to do with the Bible. The Bible, the Bible, the Bible. So I wrote a letter to her, but she didn't answer it. I explained that I used to be a preacher and I just came out of the ministry. But her mom answered it. Her mom was the president of the foundation. She said, can you write us an article about your story? So I did. And a few weeks later, I got a phone call from Oprah Winfrey's producers in Chicago saying, you have a good story. And she's doing a show, Oprah's doing a show about atheism. So could you come out to Chicago? I was in California. Because Ann, she had called Ann's office, Freedom from Religion Foundation. They wanted to do a show on atheism. So I flew to Chicago. That was the first time I knowingly met any atheist friends, except for shaking Harry's hand. I had just left the ministry just a few months before, and I sent out that letter. And that was the first time that I publicly spoke about my atheism in front of any crowd, on TV no less. It was the first time I'd ever spoken before a hostile audience. Oprah had packed that audience with Bible thumpers. Really, it was. And in fact, we still have that show. I have a video of that show, and we just showed it to our daughter Sabrina like last year for the first time, the day her parents met. Annie, Laurie, and I met that morning. We basically met on the Oprah Winfrey Show in Chicago, and we were kind of, you could see us on the video, kind of checking each other out, because there's some real life atheists, and they're speaking eloquently and with confidence, and wow. And then they admitted later they were nervous about me, like, what if I reconverted on the Oprah Show? And so you can see us kind of looking at each other, and then after a while you can see us relax. Hey, we're among friends here. This is cool. This is fun. And then that audience was, one of the women called Annie Laurie a witch, and boy did she fight back. You know, I like that attitude of fighting back. You know, and that we atheists and agnostics and non-believers, we are a part of the fabric. We are at the table. We're here too, and we can defend our views, and we're not ashamed of them, and we're not the ones with the problem. And so that's basically how we met. And it was later that Annie Laurie and I got involved, and then later it was 1987 when we got married in a free-thought ceremony at a free-thought hall in Sauk City. A woman judge with purple shoes under her robe, and at the end, you may now kiss the groom. It was a match not made in heaven, you know. So that's basically how we met. And in 2004, we became co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And she wanted to be here, but she's busy doing the real work of the foundation at the office while I'm out here having fun. So.
I have a question about, wasn't it last year or in 2007 that the Freedom from Religion Foundation had a case in front of the Supreme Court? If you could talk about that briefly. And also, what is Judge Scalia's problem?
2 years ago, we were before the Supreme Court. We did not want to go there. We were challenging George Bush's faith-based initiative. And in 2004, when we took that challenge, Sandra Day O'Connor was on the court. We actually had a swing court for a while when she was on the court. And the judge threw out our case challenging the faith-based offices in the executive branch of the federal government. The judge threw it out saying that we didn't have standing to sue because there was no direct congressional appropriation to that. That the executive can do whatever it wants with discretionary money. And we were arguing, well, you can do anything you want except you can't do anything unconstitutional. But the judge said, that may be true, but you can't sue. You don't have the standing to take the case without some congressional appropriation. But we appealed that loss, and the Seventh Circuit in Chicago agreed with us and overturned. And Judge Posner, if you know who that is, a Republican-appointed judge, usually pretty conservative, he wrote an eloquent argument in our defense, saying, how else are you going to get at this problem? So we were happy we were going to go back to court and argue the cases on the merits. But the government didn't like losing. Bush's White House didn't like being a loser, so they petitioned the Supreme Court, which granted cert, which really scared us. Annie Laurie was convinced we would lose 5-4. Turns out she was right. I thought we could win 5-4, because I thought, you know, we might have a swing vote there. But in the meantime, Alito replaced Sandra Day O'Connor. And by the time our case got to the Supreme Court, it had nothing to do with the merits. In fact, some of the justices even said, you know, what Bush was doing might in fact be wrong, but you just can't get at it that way, right? But then, of course, with Alito now, and at that time, 5 Roman Catholic justices on the court, voting mainly conservatively, we lost it. And it wasn't just we who lost. Every state church group in the country joined with us. They wrote, the Americans United wrote, and ACLU wrote wonderful friend of the court briefs for us. American Atheists did. The Joint Baptist Commission on Religious Liberty, the Jewish Commission, or whatever it's called, Jewish Commission on Religious Liberty. A group of scholars, constitutional scholars, submitted a brief on our behalf. And we had all these wonderful briefs and all this. In fact, the major newspapers in the country, the New York Times, the LA Times, they were all on our side, agreeing with Judge Posner, you know. How else are you going to challenge an unconstitutional violation?